Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And thanks, first of all, to Sunita. Quick introduction here. Sunita is a director for data engineering at Target. And she is a mother, a wife, a daughter. She is in Bangalore, India, Bengaluru. And I am going to let her do her own introduction. So over to you, Sunita.
Thanks, Sangeeta. It's really wonderful to see all of you here. Thank you for having me. Quick introduction. I don't think I can say much more than what you just said, Sangeeta. I think you just summed it up. Just that I currently work at Target. Have been here for the last 6 years. Target, as you know, is a retailer in the US. Prior to Target, I have worked at technology companies such as ThoughtWorks, Yahoo, Oracle, and I started my career at Infosys, which is a global consulting firm. I've been in Bangalore pretty much all my life, except for a brief stint in the US, in the Bay Area. I did my master's and I worked at a startup in the US. So it has been, it was a wonderful experience, but I have experienced, life both in the US and of course I am living in India. So I'm hoping that, the things that I share will resonate with this global crowd that is over here. Thank you so much for having me.
And that's actually a rare treat for us, Sunita, because you are actually our first guest from India, and that really helps because we have quite a few folks in India in our team. And as I mentioned to you, one of the reasons that we started the series was because when we had a survey within our company, we had folks in India, especially women in India, who felt like they were not being heard. So this is great because there you are right there, and you will definitely bring a different perspective from, where we are sitting in. I'm sitting in the Bay Area, and we are all over in the US. But as you know, things are definitely different. You have lived in both places, and things are definitely different. I won't necessarily say better or worse, just different. So having said that, can you tell us a little bit about, your life in India as a woman in tech, as a woman leader? What do you think about how you're doing things, and what do you think about work-life balance doing all of this?
Great. Yeah, so I think from a women in tech perspective, I'm not sure that life is any different. I think women in tech is a challenge for whichever part of the globe you are. That is a problem that we're all trying to solve, right? Just getting more women into STEM, getting more women into tech and into leadership roles. I think what might be significantly different is what we call work-life balance, or even what I'm trying now to do is more work-life integration, right? Especially with the pandemic and working from home. Couple of things that are different, right? One is a lot of the Indian companies are still working for the US market. They are not working for the local market. So work-life balance means different things because we also work in the evening. Right. And that does put, an extra strain on families. Because, you have your family time in the evening, and that is, interrupted by meetings and work that you have to do. So you really don't switch off. That can be pretty intense, especially if you have young kids at home, because they just don't understand what you're doing in front of the computer after you're supposed to have come back from work. So I'd say that is probably a significant challenge, not just for women. It is for all folks who work out of India. Just that women feel it a little bit more, maybe because of additional responsibilities that we take on at home, right? Doing all of the home stuff. From a society perspective, I think we've come a long way, especially in the cities in Bangalore, like cities like Bangalore. It is accepted that women are working, and long hours. I think we've made a lot of progress over the last few years. If anything, I'd say it's probably the women, as us, we're just like feeling guilty or concerned about how much time we have to spend at work, which may be an additional layer that we are adding on to our responsibilities.
Okay. But
Yeah.
I'm assuming there are also expectations, right?
Yeah.
Expectations, so for example, I live in the Bay Area. I live with my husband and two boys, and I don't really have that many relatives around who are going to judge me, So, but when in India, I'm sure you have much more of a community around where you feel like there are these expectations of you as a mother or as a daughter or daughter-in-law, that you are supposed to do certain things. How do you navigate those?
Yeah, I think it's challenging the burden of managing social relationships is primarily, on women, right? I mean, it is just an expected norm that if we decide to meet as a family, you have to host them, then you have to do all of the prep work, or you have to keep in mind holidays or birthdays or anniversaries and pick up gifts. And that is, additional work, right? That you're taking on. That is not recognized work. It's just additional work. From an expectation standpoint, for sure, it can be daunting. Most families, I think, who accept that having two working people to navigate, to be able to almost survive in India, most families sort of accept it at an intellectual level. But then the moment you have kids and you're now starting to make some decisions that maybe you're putting your family second over your job or that important call, there's certainly some sort of expectations, or you get looks, or people start to ask you questions and say, hey, is it really worth it? Do you really
Yeah.
want to do this? And then you get all of that self-doubt. It can definitely get challenging. I think to navigate it, you do need to have a very strong support system within your core family unit. Like, essentially you within the marriage, as a married couple, need to have that understanding that, hey, we're doing this because your job and my job, your career and my career are super important. The other way to do this is for maybe folks to take turns, right? And that is also something that I have started to see among my peers, much less than I would have hoped. But I am seeing where the men step back a little bit and allow the women to, basically take their careers forward. But definitely, I would say that the extra guilt surrounded by family is a pressure that, unless you're absolutely sure, you can take on. I didn't take it on. I quit my job multiple times when my kids were young because it was really hard.
Right. And did you at that time, and I'm saying this a little bit from personal experience because I did the same thing. I took 12 years off, and I was fortunate that I was in a position that I could actually do that. But did you at that time feel the pressure? Because it could be both ways, right? And not just from society, but from other women, other your own friends, where as a stay-at-home mom, you kind of feel the pressure, as in, oh, you just give up your career for this. What were you thinking? Did you have to go through that?
Certainly, right? I mean, it's really funny. When you're working, you're feeling the guilt of not being at home. I think that's conundrum that all women go through. When you quit your job and stay at home, then naturally people around you are like, hey, I've heard like classmates, right, from my engineering bachelor's day, they'll be like, oh, this is why women shouldn't do engineering or whatever, right? I mean, you took a seat that was meant for a man, and all you did was just maybe you worked for a year or two and then you quit. You just lost that opportunity. You didn't have to do engineering for this. That's kind of the dialogues that you hear around you, the commentary, and that does get to you. I mean, it is a personal choice, but in India, there's nothing really like personal choice. I think a lot of it is, so, there's a lot of people getting into your life, and it's a different kind of a community setup here, right? So it does affect you when people start to talk.
Yeah.
This both your choices, basically.
I have to give you one little quick example over here. I was talking to like an acquaintance, and something happened, and then they said, so, do you cook well, or something like that, like out of the blue. And I'm like, yeah. And it was a male, and I turned around and said, so do you cook? I mean, they felt it so easy to ask me, just assume that, I would be the person who would be cooking for the family. And it was like, wait a second, I can ask you the same question. So sometimes I feel like, maybe we should be turning around and asking these people who say, hey, you took up an engineering seat, like, why aren't you doing this for your family?
Yeah.
You could do it too. So
Yep.
maybe one day we will come to the world where we can pretty much, equally do this, right?
Mhm.
But having actually said that, in the workplace, have you had times where you have experienced like microaggressions or sexism, just because you are a
Yeah.
woman? Same thing, right? It would be
Yeah.
like, I know at one point, when I just graduated out of my bachelor's and I was interviewing, people were a little hesitant to hire women because they were like, oh, she's a young woman, she's going to get married, she's going to have children, and she's going to, take time off.
True.
So that's like on the bigger scale, but I'm sure there were like other microaggressions. Anything that you would like to
Oh,
share?
absolutely. When I started my career, I had, I think it was probably 9 months or something since I started working. And my boss called me one day and said, hey, tell me something. Are you serious about your career? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And he said, no, I mean, is it the job? Are you serious about your job? Like, do you just want to have this job, or are you interested in building a career? I just said, have you had this conversation with the other guys in my team? Because I was the only female. I just asked him that. And he said, no, it's because, I know a lot of women just come in, they want to spend a couple of years, they're just waiting to get married. I want to know because I am trying to invest in you. I need to know, I want to see if I can give you an opportunity to maybe go abroad, do a consulting project somewhere else. I want to know if you're just going to leave me high and dry. And so that's why I'm asking you this question. So exactly what you said. I've also experienced situations where, I was not in the office one day and there was this whole chain email connecting me to some other guy in the team, and everyone's commenting about it. And, poor guy, I mean, I think he was so shy, he would barely like speak to me. But for some reason, because we were from the same community, they connected the two of us. That whole chain reached, one of my female colleagues' inbox, and she forwarded to me. I was shocked and embarrassed and somewhat, you're feeling so queasy. You're in this environment with all of these people who are supposedly your seniors. They've been in the industry for longer, and you're like a really young, energetic, you're thinking bright-eyed, want to change the world kind of mindset. And you're suddenly facing this kind of almost college type of,
Right.
behavior
High
in a
school
professional
behavior,
setting.
really.
Yeah, it was so strange. And this is about 20 plus years ago. So I actually, said, I'm going to report this to Posh, right? I mean, the sexual harassment. I said, this is sexual harassment. You're basically
Right.
singling me out. And they went back and forth, they denied it. And then eventually they said, oh, maybe you need to think about your behavior. Like, why are you, I actually had that. So if victim shaming, you don't know, you don't have the words and the vocabulary for it. 20 years ago, we didn't.
Right.
I got shamed and I kept quiet. And I regret that to this day.
Oh my God.
And, it's something that, of course, you live and learn. And then, you obviously make sure that you speak up the next time you see something like this, even if it's not happening to you. But I actually kept quiet, and it still bothers me that I did that. So it is challenging sometimes.
So what would you do different today? Like knowing.
Well,
everything.
I would call out that behavior, right? I would just say,
Right.
hey, you're just shaming me, and we're victim shaming me, and I would just not even take it seriously. Right? I would just go and report and
Report
make sure that
to HR. Right,
yeah,
right.
I would
And
report to the
yeah,
committees. They have committees to do that.
right, right.
Yeah.
Great. Wow. That just literally shook me up. So what, what do you think we should change in the workplace to kind of avoid these things? Like in general, other than the fact that, yeah, you can go report these things to HR, but
Right.
somehow there has to be a shift in mindset, right, to do this. Any pointers, from having been in here, as to what can we do?
We're doing a lot of the things that we're doing now, right? We're hiring more women.
Mhm.
So we're creating more equitable workforces. I don't know if you all saw this movie by Pixar. It's called Pearl, Purl. It's about a pink yarn. I think you should go see it.
I'll go see it.
It's a beautiful short film about a pink ball of yarn actually comes into this office which has only men and a very bro culture, and then she begins to change herself to fit in because she's just feeling so lonely. Up
Right.
until the time a yellow ball of yarn called Lacey comes in. And then Pearl starts to feel, oh my God, she's lonely. And then she changes back to her original state. So there is a power in numbers, right? Even if you look at your own behavior, when you hang out with people in mixed company versus when you hang out with just women, there are different parts of you that come alive. I think it's important for our whole selves to be accepted in the office, and that will only happen if we have more women. So I think companies are definitely doing the right thing. They're trying to hire more women, and they are imparting, talking about these things, right? Like this forum, just having these conversations and creating awareness amongst the community. I think I would say we're doing fairly well where we are now. I think the industry overall has woken up to this. At least the technology industry has. I can't speak for the others, but the technology industry, from what I see, there's a lot of awareness. It feels like we're on the right path now.
So, as an emerging woman leader, what would you do, to make these changes in your company? How would you contribute, you think?
Well, I'm obviously, like I said, I'm doing my bit to hire women.
Hmm.
I always make sure that will interview women candidates for any role that I have, especially the more senior roles. The more the senior role, I'll be like, hey, you know what? We have to go and find women candidates to interview, right? Making sure that we are basically challenging the kind of job profiles. When we describe job profiles, when we post job profiles, we have to go through that and see, is that adapted to a certain type of person, and will that certain type of person be of a certain gender or a certain community. So making those broad and intentionally looking for diverse candidates to interview. Take chances on people. What happened to taking chances on people?
Right.
Yeah, everyone has to have pedigree, graduate from top college, whatever, right? I mean, kids' resumes start now in school. I mean, this is a whole different rant, but honestly, I mean, whatever happened to just pluck and attitude and taking chances and teaching people skills like training? What happened to all of that? I think we're running so fast sometimes that we forget to look in unusual places for talent. So I think I definitely try to do that a whole lot. I try to connect, be the face of my company because, there are few of us. We need to be louder to sort of make it look balanced. It's a role that's uncomfortable for me. I'm actually an introvert. It's a role that's uncomfortable for me, but I'm doing it because it is important. So many women reach out to me and say, "Hey, you know what? It was really cool to see you there," or they can start seeing themselves. So those are, I think, the ways in which I definitely challenge my peers. In every meeting, they'll be like, Sunita, I think you have a point of view on this one. I definitely challenge them to think about talent differently. That is
That's
one thing.
That's wonderful. And I like the fact that, you can pick them from different industries and have training within
Mhm.
yourselves, within your
Yeah.
own. Yes. Okay. And then how about does it make it, as a woman leader, are you doing anything, or is your company doing anything to help women with their work-life balance or work-life integration? I love that work-life integration, by the way.
Yeah.
Are they taking steps to help women? Because as you said, yes, ideally, everybody should take, onus for stuff at home with kids, etc. But it tends to more be upon women.
Right.
So, as a company or as a voice for your company,
Mhm.
are there steps that one can take to help
Mhm.
women, maintain this integration?
Sure. So, definitely, I think like most other companies there are a lot of diversity initiatives. You have one at every age and stage of a woman's career, right? Right from colleges trying to run training programs or internships for women from not necessarily the top colleges, but expanding the pool by going to maybe tier two colleges. Then there's leadership programs to hire women into leadership. There's a lot of different kind of structured programs that help. Those serve two purposes, right? One is, of course, actually hiring the candidate, but two is it sparks conversation, right? Every time we talk about this, we're like, hey, we need to sponsor this, we need to fund this, we need to run this program, and it's run by men and women. So there's definitely a lot more awareness and conversation. I find that to be more valuable than looking at, oh, through this program, did we hire five? Oh, we hired only five. I mean, it's okay if you hired only five, but you had so many conversations around it. You looked at so many resumes. It broadened your horizon a little bit, right? So that is one. From a work-life integration, I'd say that, for example, when the second wave hit us, I think we just shut down meetings after 5. That is it. We just said no meetings after 5 for the teams in India because it was really hard. That was a great move, not just for the women. It was a great move for everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
And in general, right, just providing a lot more flexibility. In the
Nice.
pandemic, I'd say it has increased. Like I think almost all companies and definitely Target, we have increased our awareness about work-life integration and made it okay for both men and women to take the time out to take care of family. I think that has been a blessing from the pandemic. So the conversations are now less about women needing to take time off and more about people needing to take the time off to be with their families.
So what, if I may ask, so um in order to keep that going and in order to keep you, just excited and energetic, do you take some time off for like personal care, uh, travel? Well, I shouldn't say travel in the pandemic, but in general, travel. But something that you like to do on the side, like or
Yeah.
volunteer work or anything
Yeah.
for personal fulfillment, right? Some people really like, to go out and run or yoga, whatever it is.
Yeah, I actually joined music classes, recently about a year ago. But before the pandemic, I think I got a pet, and I think she's been a great stress buster for me. Again, a pandemic pet, but I'd say before that, right before the pandemic, reading is a big de-stressor for me. I read a lot, and socializing and partying is another one. Of course, I don't do that now, but Friday evenings used to be my girls' night out, and Saturdays is with family, those types of things. So those are my self-care routines. I'm not much into exercise, unfortunately. I should, but I'm not much into exercise.
No, that's great. That's, I was excited about this call because I knew it would be so relatable talking to you, you know. And every time you're saying something, I was like, yeah, I feel you totally, totally. So one, it's almost time, and I want to make sure that if people have any more questions that they can ask. But one thing that I did want to ask you, and this is, from the wealth of information that I've gathered, even from previous chats that I've had, we right now in India or even here, right, we see a lot of women actually getting into the technical side of things, getting into STEM education. So they are graduating with a STEM education, but then you see the numbers really falling off when you get into the workforce. And there's so many things, right? Like family life and stuff like that. And then there is a great push, as we all know, to bring women into, the C-suite and the leadership positions. But the issue that, we have sort of seen is that a lot of times it's like a check mark. So there is one seat at the table. So very often I've heard people say, we need to change that, right? We need to change the notion that, okay, you know what, we have a woman at the table, and maybe change it to, there are many more seats available at this table for women, so that when you are trying to get women up there, the women don't have to fight amongst themselves for that one lone seat. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. It should. I think we started with token diversity, right? I mean, let's just get someone, and then there are, I think, studies that say that once that someone gets in, it's actually much harder to get the second one,
Right.
because people almost feel like, okay, I checked off the item from that list. I've got a woman at the table, so I don't need to do a lot more. For sure, you have to be looking at least 50%, right, if not more. And so you can't. And I know that there is a lot of conversation and criticism around goal-based hiring. I've heard folks say, hey, we should be looking for diversity of thought, not diversity of gender or race. But my point is, let's just get these visible symbols of diversity and inclusion in first, and then naturally the other things will follow. I think there's no question. You have to keep trying to hire as many women as possible at at the highest level, and 50% should be a goal for everyone, because that's 50% of the population. So why shouldn't they be equally represented? So I think you can't just stop at one. If that's like fairly simple. You have to keep going for as many. And like I said, right, just looking at unusual backgrounds, being willing to take breaks in careers, giving a lot of training and upskilling opportunities. Those are ways in which you can enable people from different backgrounds to come in.
Right. So I am going to go on to some of the questions that have been coming in. I think one of them you have already answered, which is, what does your company do to help employees maintain work-life balance? We already went over that one. What's your typical day look like?
Well, I wake up, take my dog for a walk, make food. Hopefully my kids are in school by then. They're older. I have 2 teenagers, so they don't need help from me anymore. Thank God for that. So they can just get to their classes, online, offline, whatever it is. And then the funny things I do. I'll tell you a couple of things I do to manage the madness of my workday. I have anchoring calls. So I have this 9:30 call with my direct reports. That makes it mandatory that I get to my desk. So I'm not like cleaning this last bit of kitchen that needed to be cleaned. I don't do it. I'm like, 9:30, I have to take this call. So I set up my meeting first thing in the morning with my direct reports at 9:30. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Mondays I don't. Monday is my me time, I focus. And similarly, at 1:05 in the afternoon, I have a virtual open office, which any of my skip level reports can come in, say hello and chat with me, and they can just book time. So it's the equivalent of having an open office. I do that so that I get to my desk in the afternoon by lunch. So these are my 2 anchoring routines. Then in the middle, it's just a blur of meetings and reading and thinking. I do some things like context days. I say Mondays are for my me time. Tuesdays are for one subject area that I'm one team that I'm managing. Wednesdays for the other, and so on. And so that's how I manage my work week.
I actually love that 1:30 p.m. meeting that you have. That I think is also a mark of a very good leader, where you are keeping yourself open to, it's like your office hours, open office
Yeah.
hours, where
Yeah.
you can have people skip level, and that they feel comfortable coming, and you're so much more accessible to people. Do you just out of do you at that time ever hear of issues surrounding very similar topics, right? Where there might be women who come up to you and say, we are not feeling heard, or there is so and so that's happening that is not convenient to me, and maybe we can change that. Do you actually hear those? Are they comfortable enough to come share this with you?
Yeah, I think both folks do. Even the men do. When they're feeling stuck in their career, they usually come to me and say, "Hey, what can I do to get unstuck? What is your perspective? Like, what are you looking for if I have to get to that next level?" So they do appreciate that skip level perspective. I'd say both. It's not really gender specific. Both folks come and share occasionally things like that with me.
Okay. Another question. Have you had any mentors through your career? And what do you think of mentoring? How important is it?
I actually have obviously had a lot of mentors. You can't navigate the workplace without mentors. You don't need for people that I reach out to. I'd actually say I'm very blessed to have peer mentors. I actually have such a fabulous relationship. So you talked about competing, right? Actually, typically you're competing with your peers in an organization. But I've been fortunate to have folks whom I can actually call for career advice. And I've even discussed options outside of my current company with them. We have talked about offers and what's happening in the market out there. It's been a great source of information. I'd say from a senior level, it's been more sponsorship than mentorship. Mentorship for sure when I go with questions, but no doubt, right? You need folks who sponsor you way more than you need folks who mentor you. That has just been my personal experience.
So it's a good support system
Good support
around.
system and people who will advocate for you when you're not in the room.
Okay, great. Another question. I think you touched upon this a little bit, but especially with I'm assuming with your new pet, but how do you deal with burnout, especially during the pandemic? Because it's hard to have work boundaries when your house is your office. And I know you did mention 5 p.m., no more meetings, right?
Yeah, I was for a short period of time though, but it's back to whatever, right? I do feel it when I feel stressed. I just take a week off. I've done that multiple times in the pandemic. I just take a week off and shut everything off, and then just do whatever, right? I mean, I'm not going out anywhere, but I'm at home, and but I'm not looking at work. That helps for sure. And picking up the phone and calling friends that I haven't spoken to in a long time. Those are typical ways in which I manage. But I've definitely felt more burnout in the last 2 years than I have ever felt in my career. It's been really
Yeah,
hard.
I think you speak for all of us,
Yeah.
in the pandemic. It's just harder, and there's been research to prove it too. So absolutely. I know we are really getting close to time, so I am going to ask you one last question. Can you share the best career advice that you have received?
Right. So the best, when I was trying to take on a leadership role and I was trying to talk to a senior director, she was mentoring me, and I was like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And really focusing a lot about myself, on myself. She actually told me, hey, if you want to become a leader, stop thinking about yourself. It's not about you. It's about, what you're going to do when you get into that role. What problems are you trying to solve here? What impact are you going to have on the company, on the people that you're working with, on the business? Stop thinking about yourself. I think that was the best piece of advice. Sometimes you get too much into your own head and you're like, oh, I've moved into this role and how's that person looking at me? And, am I sounding like a leader? Am I acting like a leader? Doesn't matter, right? As long as if you got there, you deserve to be there. But what are you doing with this privilege that you have now? You have some additional power. Are you using it? I think that has been superb advice, because every time I go into that spin, I just remember what she said, and I said, "Hey, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how I sounded, what mistakes I made. How can I correct it? How can I move forward? Get out of your own head." Best advice I ever received.
Thank you. That is pretty cool. I love it. I think I need that advice too. But that's great. Thank you so much. There might be a couple more questions rolling in, but I know it is fairly past time actually. So I am going to kind of stop it here, and I'm sure we will have chances again in the future to chat and to talk. But I just want to say thank you very, very, very much for coming on today. I know it's late at night for you, and you did make the time. So I feel really fortunate and appreciate you sharing all your thoughts with us. And hopefully we can keep continuing the series, and I'm sure we'll have a follow-on chat sometime. But I would love to keep in touch and keep learning, because that's, I think, the main thing, for all of us. Every day that we learn a new thing has been a successful day as far as I'm concerned. So thank you. I learned a lot. And I think one of the main things that I learned from all of this is that for all those who are attending and in this talk, please make sure that your spouses attend too, because because they need to hear this as much as we do. So that would definitely help. Thanks so much.
Thank you.